Run on Less Electric Depot, an event from the North American Council for Freight Efficiency. In this video, I'm going to go over the medium and light duty electric trucks. Those type of vehicles represent about half of the nearly 100 metric tons of CO2 that get put into the atmosphere from trucks doing work in North America. Let's get into it. In my video on the electric semi-trucks, I did an analysis of how fast those trucks can charge. That's a perfect time to remind you to check out that video. And how about tapping the subscribe button so it shows up in your feed? Taking the battery state of charge data, the charge time, and the stated battery capacity, we can calculate the approximate peak charging rate. No surprise, Tesla is a monster in this category. For the medium and light duty vans, however, they get used differently. For the most part, they were charging overnight using AC level 2 chargers. When I do the calculations, I typically get about 7 kilowatts. That's standard AC level 2 chargers running at 32 amps. UPS trucks were a little faster. They use a low powered DC charger that maxes out at 30 kilowatts. The benefits of DC charging is that it does not go through the onboard charger on the truck. There's a small efficiency loss when it gets converted from AC to DC that the battery needs, so it's a little more efficient. Penske had two different use cases that were kind of interesting. The International EMV box truck that they have did some DC fast charging. It appears it was using the 150 kilowatt peak chargers from BTC Power. The truck advertises a peak charging rate of 125 kilowatts, and by my calculations, it did better than that. The other interesting truck was the Ford E-Transit vans that they have. Occasionally, it would do an early morning run, then come back before noon to charge. This is referred to as opportunity charging. When it comes back, you have the opportunity to re-energize it. However, electricity prices vary throughout the day, time of use pricing. Penske has a battery energy storage system, or BESS, connected to Siemens DC chargers that can output up to 50 kilowatts. And that's pretty much what they did, charge the E-Transit at 50 kilowatts. This way, Penske is not drawing off the electrical grid during peak hours of use. Medium-duty trucks are class 4 through 6. In this event, I only have data on the International EMV box trucks. However, and I use that word a lot in my video, however. Anyway, 2 years ago, they did an event with two other Class 6 box trucks, a Peterbilt 220 EV hauling Cheetos, and a Lion 6. That's a Quebecois startup company. I did calculations of efficiency and range, and there are a whole bunch of reasons why the efficiency numbers could vary. So keep that in mind when looking at these results. I'm just saying I like the numbers. All three had similar calculated efficiency. They are more efficient than the semi-trucks from the last video. That makes sense. They're smaller. And the calculated range compared to their advertised range looked pretty good too. They were all as good or maybe even a little better than the advertised numbers. Another observation from these trucks is the distance by speed data. In general, they were more efficient when they can run more often between 20 to 29 miles per hour. When they spend too much time at 50 miles per hour plus, aerodynamics for these big bricks really drag them down. When they spend more time 0 to 19 miles an hour, that's when they're in stop and go, which boosts the regen numbers as it's trying to help recover some of that energy, but it doesn't perfectly recover the energy. So there's an efficiency loss there. That's why that 20 to 39 mile per hour is a kind of the sweet spot for these trucks to run. But at the end of the day, you have to run the route that you're given. The other medium-duty trucks were step vans. They have a low ride height, allowing the driver to get in and out easily to deliver packages. They also allow the driver to step into the back to get the package off the shelf. Right now, these trucks are electric versions of the combustion engine models. They use the same box as the others. Some manufacturers are starting to think outside the box and ways of improving the aerodynamics. EVs are more efficient than combustion engines. That's why a little thing like a 5% improvement in aero gets noticed more on an EV than with a combustion engine truck. Let's look at Purelator. The company that invented the oil filter is starting to use electric vans to deliver auto parts. Nah, that's not true. But I'll admit, that's what I first thought. You see, Purelator Filters did invent the oil filter. And then there's Purelator Courier in Canada. They're like UPS or FedEx, and they do operate electric trucks. And they were once owned by the filter company, thus the same name. So maybe I'm not the only dumb American to make this mistake. They use step vans from Motive, an EV only manufacturer. The efficiency number I calculated was a tiny bit better than the box trucks. That kind of makes sense. They're lower. I guess you could say a more aerodynamic brick, but still a brick pushing through the air. Another participant was UPS. They used the MT50E step van from Freightliner Custom Chassis. Very similar to the Motive, but with a bigger battery and longer range. This is where the numbers stop making sense, and I'm not sure why. I did reach out and try to confirm some details. I haven't heard back. The battery size on the Run On Less website is consistent with other data available, so I'm using that as the basis for the calculation. A smaller battery could explain why the numbers are off. The driving speed profiles between the Motive and the Freightliner custom chassis truck are similar, so I think they're comparable. But the efficiency numbers were much worse for the Motive. It was much worse than for the box trucks. It was even worse than the Class 8 semi trucks, and that makes no sense. The only thing I noticed in the data was regen. It didn't generate as much regen energy as for the Motive trucks. Now, these trucks do allow you to adjust regen. Did the driver at UPS have it set to its lowest value while the driver at Purelator had it set to stun and its highest value? I don't know if that would be enough to really explain the difference in efficiency, but I'm going to declare that my calculated efficiency and range numbers just aren't trustworthy, so forget you ever saw them. Penske, Purelator, and Chester Cheetah all operated Ford E-Transit electric vans. The Cheeto van is a cutaway with a large box full of orange puffs in the back. That can hurt aerodynamics, but that truck was operated in Queens, New York, and it rarely ever went over 40 miles an hour, so aero isn't going to play much of a role. Calculated efficiency for all three were in the same range, again, all being used a little differently. I'll talk about that in a second. Range of the E-Transit is advertised at only 108 miles, which, you may think that sucks, but they're all estimated to outperform that number. And more importantly, most of them didn't even use the range that they had. The Purelator averaged only 27 miles a day. That's 43 kilometers for our Canadian friends, but a whopping 44 stops a day, dropping off and picking up packages. One weekend, they didn't even bother to charge it. It ended the day at 85% on Friday, and they said, you know what, that'll be fine for Monday, so they just left it unplugged. The Cheetomobile drove about the same distance, but had very few stops. That truck goes to stores, and the driver spends an hour or two stocking shelves before going on to their next stop. So not a lot of miles, not a lot of stops. It went 3 days at one point without charging, not even bothering to plug it in. In these cases, it actually makes sense to put a smaller battery in the E-Transit or rethink how they get used to get the most out of the capability that they have. Now, Penske did push their truck more. I mentioned earlier that they have an early morning shift, then they come back to charge, and then go out again on some days. It gets the job done. By the way, Penske did show a GM BrightDrop van in operation, but no data was made available, and I'm kind of bummed. I would have liked to have seen that data. In conclusion, all these trucks get their jobs done, and they don't even break a sweat doing it. They could even do more. The medium-duty box trucks and the Motive step van have very good efficiency, but they could benefit from a more aerodynamic shape. As is, doing one last set of calculations comparing the cost of electricity to operating on diesel, and you can see the savings. Plus, with the regenerative braking, there's less maintenance. Now, they do cost more and they require an investment to add charging equipment at the depot. But the real reason we're doing this is to take the first steps towards reducing the impact of transportation on climate change. Yes, even when the electricity comes from burning things, the superior efficiency of battery electrics make them better over their lifetime. You know what to do. Like, subscribe, and thank you for watching.